I waited until the gavel hit before I saw myself as available. But I think I needed to go to therapy. I think I should have taken my children to therapy.
Right,
I don't think they were
absolutely.
ready for me to start dating.
Right.
But I think I was just desperate. I was hurting and I was desperate. And so I jumped back out there because I was looking at it legally. I'm legally free now.
Right, right.
But I wasn't emotionally ready.
It was a time for me also to regroup
Right.
as a person spiritually, look at what I did wrong, look at my choices and say, okay, Yvonne, what were you thinking? Where were you mentally or even emotionally when you made this choice? And it really got me to the place where you know, how you just make declarations over your life.
Yeah.
And I just said, you know what, from now on, I don't want anything else but God's will for my life.
Right.
I am here with Joel Brooks, my husband, my friend, my life partner, my pastor.
Your boss.
Right, your boss. I don't know, I think I'm your boss.
Oh, okay, we'll work through that.
But we're going to talk about marriage today.
Yeah,
you know,
okay,
why
good.
do you feel that people are getting divorced so quickly?
Yeah.
You know, you have so many people right now, the percentage of divorce in marriage is almost like 50-50.
Yes,
You know,
maybe a little over.
Right. It's probably over that now. But why do you think people are getting divorced?
Well, I think I've heard several things: communication, money. I think the primary reason is loss of respect. I think married couples lose respect for one another, and how can I say this? Once you lose respect for one another, then the love goes. Okay, and so there's obviously a lack of love if there's a divorce, and I believe there's 3 legitimate reasons for a Christian getting a divorce. Okay, and all these reasons can be overcome. I've seen people
Right.
bounce back from all of them. So as a Christian, you know, your final red light, green light comes from God, comes from
Right.
the Holy Spirit. Okay, and so, but I believe infidelity, obviously. Okay, violence, physical abuse, and the other one is drug use. Okay, because when a person starts using street drugs, it pulls them into a whole nother world.
Absolutely.
It exposes, you don't know who's coming by the house now, and so it exposes the family to a whole nother world, and things could go bad real quick. Now, I've seen people come back from all those. I'm not saying if you're going through that, go
that
get a
you
divorce.
have to, right.
But I'm saying
Those are
that
some of
those
the
are
main
things
reasons.
that will
Yeah.
end your marriage, could
Right.
end your marriage
Right.
if you get involved in them, okay?
Right.
And so divorce, you and I both have been divorced.
Right. So
And
we know
we
we've
know
been
that it's one of the
through that,
hardest things that you'd ever, I've lost both of my parents, and I still say my divorce was the hardest thing I've ever been through, okay, emotionally, and the hardest thing to bounce back from emotionally. And
Right.
so it's if you can avoid it at all costs, because it's tough on the couples, it's tough on the kids, it's tough on the in-laws. It just changes things for everybody. And
Right.
so if you're going through something, I would give my marriage a chance. I would give God a shot. I would get therapy. I'd get counseling. I'd get ministry. I'd pray. I'd do everything I can to keep the marriage together. Okay, first of all, okay. But sometimes, how can I say it? Sometimes divorce will actually solve a problem.
Right.
Okay, and that's the only way you should get divorced is if it solves a problem. Because sometimes in the process of trying to solve a problem, we create a bigger problem.
What do you mean? Like, unpack that a little bit.
Well, what I'm saying is like, say, for instance, having an affair in a marriage, okay, can create a much bigger problem.
Oh, yes.
You say, well, my husband's not affectionate or my wife is not affectionate. So then you go and you have an affair. Well, that might be a reason for you, but it's going to create a bigger problem for you. Okay,
And that still, to me, is irresponsibility.
Yeah, that's
Because it's like you're saying, my wife is not affectionate. You know, it really doesn't tell you a whole lot about what's going on in the marriage.
No, it doesn't.
Children, what's happening, why she's not affectionate. Maybe
Right.
you're not affectionate. So you have a lot of irresponsibility and statements like that without,
Right.
flushing out. I think those things can be worked out most times. I think it's the severe immaturity, the infidelity
Yeah.
And as you said, we've both been divorced, and that
Right.
was my deal. It's like, I don't want to share you with the world,
Yeah.
so you have to decide, and you have so many people with addictions. You have
Yeah.
pornography addictions,
Yeah.
all kinds of things that can lead to some really unhealthy marriages,
Right.
an unhealthy thing spiritually that happens in the home when those things are brought into the home.
Right.
And so, like you said, sometimes it's about solving a problem. I can't live, this standard of living is not good for me,
Right.
or my children at that time, having 3 young girls.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
was in a really unhealthy situation, and so how can I say it? If divorce is a sin, you have to commit a sin. And there's some people who commit the sin of divorce, and there's other people who are victims of divorce.
right,
Excuse me. And so, in the courts, they simply recognize if your marriage is over.
right,
In other words, you can't walk in the court and say, "Hey, we're loving each other, we're having sex, but for tax purposes, we're gonna get it."
right. They won't
give you a
allow it.
divorce.
Right, absolutely.
Okay? What they recognize is that this marriage has been dissolved, and so we're going to legally dismantle it for the purposes of being fair to both parties. But court simply, in the same way a pastor cannot marry you, join two souls together. Okay, the courts can't break you up.
Right, it's about
If
the
that makes-
soulish ties.
Yeah, and so the marriage is broken by the time the judge gavel
Right,
come down.
right.
Okay, and so what happened to break the marriage? Infidelity, violence, breaking the trust of the marriage.
Right,
And so the question was presented to me: How do you divorce proof your marriage? Okay, well, you take divorce off the table.
right, for sure.
Okay, and the stuff that would cause a divorce, you take that stuff off the table. Okay, having an affair should not be a possibility for you. Anybody can fall.
Right.
Okay, but it should be off the table. I'm not doing that. Okay,
Absolutely.
And so in every situation and scenario, I represent my wife as well as myself because we're one.
Right,
And if it would offend her, it should offend me.
absolutely.
If that makes sense.
Right.
Okay. Anything.
Talking about practicing the presence of your
mate.
spouse.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And so any attack against her is or any invitation to do something that would offend my marriage is warfare.
Oh,
it's war
absolutely.
against my family.
Absolutely.
And so we have to recognize that. Okay. So you don't talk about it. You don't allow it to be a place where you go when you're angry. Well, I want a divorce. Okay,
Right.
The word should not come out of your mouth,
Right.
unless you are just in an unlivable situation, and
Right.
it is possible to be in an unlivable situation.
Right.
Okay?
You mentioned the violence, and I think that people don't see the violence
Yeah.
that happens, in divorce and even in infidelity,
Right.
because it's like
Relational violence.
relational violence, absolutely. And so, like, if we weren't married, if I went over there, or I tried to pick you up, you being a married man, if I punched your children, you would
Yeah.
have a problem with that.
Right.
You would stop me from trying to assault, your children.
Physically solemn. Yeah.
But spiritually, what happens in a marriage when a woman comes onto a married man or a married man comes onto another woman, it's violence in
Yeah.
the spirit, and
your
you
family,
are
relational
right.
violence,
And so
yeah.
it's the same thing. There's no way I could ever love your children
Right.
if I'm coming after you.
Right.
Then you have some of these people who get married afterwards and then they want to be stepmom. Well, you're the one who messed things up. You hated me so much, or you were so selfish, looking at yourself so much
Right.
that
You
you
broke up
didn't
our
you didn't
family.
consider me
Yeah.
as a kid. And then
Right.
those are some issues that come out
Right.
through blended families.
Right.
So it begins to get really hard.
So if you find yourself getting a divorce, what do you think you should do?
Well, I'll just talk about what I did. It took me a while to get there
Yeah.
because being a Christian, I did not want to get divorced. I didn't want to have the sting of divorce.
Right.
I think I was 20 when I first got married, which was way too young. And I knew
For you.
for me,
Yeah.
I think I was ready. I was ready,
Yeah.
but I still think it's too young.
Really? Okay.
But But I knew I wanted to be married. I knew I wanted to be committed to this person. When I say I shouldn't have done it, I don't feel like it was God's will for my life. I think that's something I ignored.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know, but it took me a while to get to the place of divorce. You know, I think
Right.
my oldest daughter was 9. You know, when I finally said, "Hey, we can't do this anymore."
Right.
And so I spent a long time separated
Okay.
because I did not feel comfortable getting divorced
Peace.
spiritually. I didn't have the peace to do it yet.
Right.
And so I think my daughter might have been, my oldest daughter probably was 12 or
When you finally
13,
got divorced,
something like that, when I finally got divorced.
Right.
But I actually felt peace about it. You know, I felt that, okay, this is time for me to move on. I felt like if I would have stayed in that relationship, that it would have been damaging to me, you know, and my children. And so for that reason, I had to, you know, get out of it. And it wasn't a physical violence, you know. It was just,
And you also have biblical.
I had biblical grounds, you know, for divorce,
Yeah.
for sure, you know, infidelity,
Right.
you know, consistent infidelity, you know, and so I had biblical grounds, you know, to do it. But then I remember one Sunday, I went to the lawyers already, had all my paperwork situated, and my pastor said, and I guess something must have happened in the church, and he said, "I don't want anybody to get a divorce, you know, unless they come and talk to us first." You know, we had several pastors in the church,
Yeah.
and so I had to go talk to my area pastor. Out of respect, you know,
Right.
and obedience, I did that, you know, and I went to my area pastor and I spoke to him about what was going on in the relationship. And he felt that he could fix it, but I knew I had already had peace, you know, from God that hey,
Right.
you know, go on. I already knew that it was something that I felt could hurt me long term. But he, you know, tried to reach out to my ex-husband, and eventually, I guess they had a couple conversations. He said, "Yvonne, go ahead, you know, you're released." So
Yeah.
I did go to my pastors, you know, and we worked through that, and it was a good decision for me. You know, it wasn't the decision that I wanted.
Right.
It wasn't the decision that I hoped for.
Right.
Because in my heart, I thought it was going to be a forever relationship.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I planned for forever. But it's really hard. You know, and so we worked through it, and God was with us, and that was the saving grace right there, that God was with us. You know, and so my children and I would say, "Okay, God, I want my children to be a stat. You know, I don't want that. You know, you be their father, and you be, you know, God to them in every way possible. You know, and so it was a time for me also to regroup as a person spiritually, look at what I did wrong, look at my choices, and say, okay, Yvonne, what were you thinking? Where were you mentally or even emotionally when you made this choice? And it really got me to the place where you know, how you just make declarations over your life.
Yeah.
And I just said, you know what, from now on, I don't want anything else but God's will for my life.
Right.
And I'm willing to wait. I'm not going to be out here doing a whole bunch of dating. That was just for me.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't do that because I really wanted to wait. And then you just kind of fell in my lap. No.
Yeah, right.
My pastors introduced us, but the process worked, you know, just kind of getting with God, because God knew I wanted to be married again. And he knew that I loved the concept of marriage and family.
Right.
But, you know, it was something that I had to do. It wasn't an easy thing, but God was with me through it.
Yeah, I think I started dating too soon. I think if you were into your marriage, if you were really into your marriage, if your marriage ends, it should leave you messed up.
Oh yes,
Okay,
that's the wrong time to date.
If you were healthy in a healthy person with a healthy attitude towards marriage, when your marriage breaks up, you should be wrecked.
Oh yes.
Okay, and that's no time to start dating.
Right.
And like I was talking to one young lady, and she was dating, and I said, well, how long has he been divorced? And she told me like 6 months. I said, you're Advil.
That's right. Right.
Your name is Tylenol.
Explain that some.
Well, because you are the pain reliever from the pain they just went through.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I might take some Advil if I'm hurting, but I'm not looking to make a diet of it.
Right.
I'm not looking to make it permanent.
Right.
And there are a lot of things that feel really good when you're hurting that you're not drawn to permanently. And so if you're Advil, you're probably not wife.
Right.
Is what
Absolutely.
I'm saying there. And so
or
I think,
husband the other way.
or husband, yeah. And so I think I started dating too. I was faithful. I didn't do any dating. I didn't, I was never unfaithful in my marriage, and I waited until the gavel hit before I saw myself as available. But I think I needed to go to therapy. I think I should have taken my children to therapy.
Right,
I don't think they were
absolutely.
ready for me to start dating.
Right.
But I think I was just desperate. I was hurting and I was desperate, and so I jumped back out there because I was looking at it legally. I'm legally free now,
Right, right.
but I wasn't emotionally ready necessarily, and so had some train wrecks there. Okay, that didn't need to happen, and a guy who is all broken up, because it gives you a level of immaturity. Okay,
Absolutely.
and you know how they'll put up out an all points bulletin on a criminal
Right.
that's on the loose.
Right.
I believe sometimes single guys who are divorced, there needs to be a bulletin out there. Watch
Single
out for
women
this
too.
guy.
Women too.
Watch out for this guy.
Yeah.
Don't date this guy, man, because
Yeah.
he's dangerous.
Right.
You know? And so and I think I fit that bill for a little while. Okay, and so I feel my family could have come through it because I was a single dad for 8 years, and so I think my family could have come through it better if we had concentrated on getting healthy and getting whole before. Because what happens is, and a lot of people don't realize this, is a relationship makes you feel whole
Oh, absolutely.
when you're not.
A lot of life. It feels like
just you feel complete.
live,
Yeah,
right.
there's nothing like being in love. Okay, there's nothing like it, and so it just makes you feel like you're healthy, like you're
Right.
ready for this. You know, when actually you're probably not.
right.
Okay, and
Right.
so that's what you have to watch out for when you're divorced is getting into something unhealthy.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say to somebody who's recently divorced. Now, what do you think about this? The whole concept of remarriage, blended
Well,
families. What do you think about that?
I think right now blended families on the rise because all these people are getting divorced. They're not, there's a large percentage that are not staying single.
Yeah.
So they are getting married again. So I think it's a God thing. I think God loves family. I think God places the lonely in family.
Right. Solitary.
Right.
in
Solitary in family. And so
Yeah.
I think that it's a great thing. I think we have blended families. The blended families is so broad. That term.
Right.
It's not just married. Your children, my children.
Yeah.
It's all the other pieces of it. Bringing in children for foster, adoption, all kinds of pieces. So I think it's wonderful. When it happens, it doesn't always work well because you have two families cultures. You have two families who may be messed up. You're not coming together again prematurely. You mentioned that before.
Yeah.
Who have not worked through their things, and then
Yeah.
you have this big explosion.
Right.
And even when you have walked children through counseling,
Yeah.
there's still some dynamics that are different, like even little things like with us, our Christmas tree was always live. We never got fake Christmas trees. You love fake Christmas trees. Like, what is with the fake Christmas trees?
Yeah.
And so, no, you had
You
to
can
fight.
buy the smell, You
Right,
can buy the
right.
Christmas
But
tree
you had,
smell.
but there's nothing to me like a live Christmas tree in the
Right,
house
right.
during Christmas season. But it's just little things, that can be big things. Territory, as far as children.
Yeah.
Where's my place? Where do I fit in? And then when you're dealing with children who already have different emotional things, going on with them, to add a blended family to the mix, can be traumatic. And so I think it's really important. I think hindsight, I would have liked to say, okay, let's take everybody through counseling.
Absolutely.
I feel like my children were a lot younger when it happened. My youngest was 3 months. When we first
When you got divorced.
when we first not
Separated.
First separated, 3 months. I had a 2-year-old and a 9-year-old.
Right.
And then your children, when it first happened, they were teens already.
Well,
They're
I think
preteens.
my girls were 9 and my son was 13.
Yeah. And so we both was single or separated for a good while. But, you can get into habits and you feel like they're whole.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily whole. I do believe in blended families. I just feel like families need to take the time to make sure everybody's walking into the marriage healthy.
And prepare and be prepared for it,
right.
because there's no way to rehearse what it's going to feel like
Right.
once you put the two families together.
And that's why, going back to the covenant.
Yeah.
You know, covenant is important. You
Right.
know, but it's important in blended families as well, because there's going to be more
Absolutely.
reasons. I think we've talked to many, as pastors, we've talked to many couples who've been have blended families, and one of the number one things that I've heard that always gets on my last nerve is, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
I'm like, you did.
Yeah,
You
right.
did sign up for this.
Right, yeah.
You know, you signed up for this. That's what covenant is.
Yeah.
And so now it's not just covenant between me and you. There's a covenant between me and your children as a responsible adult that I need to have. There's a covenant between you and my children, and there's a covenant as a family.
Right.
You know, and so I think, you know, that's so important. I think people, when trouble comes, what do you do when trouble comes? You know, and a lot of people are really quick to run.
Right.
And you really have to work those issues out. You got to look and see, where am I being immature?
Right.
Because you
Yeah,
can feel like you're the most loving
it's a big
person in the
deal.
world.
Yeah. And I think you also want to put yourself in the other person's shoes.
Absolutely. What would I
You know,
want?
because you brought these little girls into my world, and here's this man who's a pastor, okay, now telling me what to do. You know, so I always allowed you to lead in discipline. Okay, I didn't want them to feel like they were thrust into some place where somebody they didn't know and they didn't choose now had the say over their life. Okay, I'm the dad, and I lead the household, but I'm not the lead disciplinarian. I'm not the one leading at the spankings and all that. And at some point, you can get to where that's okay. It never seemed okay to me. I don't think I ever spanked your girls, okay? Because I just didn't want them to feel like that they were in an oppressive situation and being sensitive. Because home, man, ought to be a happy place. Home, you should feel safe in your home. And so I never wanted them to feel unsafe.
Right, and I think they did feel protected. I mean, there was one time, I think one of our girls wanted to date somebody.
Yeah.
And it's like, why can't I date? Why can't I date?
Yeah, I would put my foot down.
Right,
in
you
those
put your foot down in those
situations,
situations, which was great.
Yeah.
But when you sat down and spoke to them, you know, and it actually caused them to see their value.
Right.
You know, and they were actually able to get over that. I remember they didn't like the fact, but they felt good about it. They felt good leaving your office.
Valued, yeah.
Because they felt valued. But I think, to me, one of the biggest issues in blended family is the lack of commitment, you know, and the lack of covenant.
Well, it's easier. How can I say it? It's easier to get divorced a second time.
Right.
And I realize that because when you and I would hit a tough place, in your first marriage, there's this thing, you know you're married forever.
Right.
Okay. And in order to get divorced, you've got to violate that. So there's a value in you that in order to get divorced, you gotta break something. Something breaks.
Right.
Okay. And then when you get remarried, it's not that thing is restored. It's that thing that holds you together now. It's easier to go there and say, "Hey, man, I don't need this."
Right.
And so, and that's what you have to watch with a second marriage, is that it's a lot easier to go to that place now that you've worn a path to it.
It's like the innocence is gone.
Yeah.
You know, the innocence and the belief in marriage happily ever after. Right.
People who are in a remarriage is God restore that value for covenant, for faithfulness, to the marriage. And so that's a big deal.
Really big deal. And I think because that innocence is gone and they've had hurt, it's like, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to sign up for this. Yeah. And they're out too early and they actually miss the gold.
Yeah.
You know, that could be available.
Right.
You know, the happily ever after.
You and I both seen people get divorced that we knew could have made it.
Absolutely.
And go through this pain and this breakup and this setback when all you needed was help.
Right, absolutely.
Somebody to help you walk through it.
Somebody to understand you.
Yeah. And so to those out there who may be in a tough marriage, man, get you some help. If you wind up divorced, you want to be able to say, I did everything
possible.
I could to keep my marriage together.
Absolutely.
Okay?
And I felt that I did everything that I could do to save my marriage.
Right. And if you didn't take responsibility for it,
absolutely.
be honest about it and go to your family with that. This is what I did.
Right.
That caused our family to fail. And so
absolutely.
Just be honest about it. But marriage is nothing like marriage. And I thank God for you.
Yeah.
And
I thank God
we
for
don't
you.
talk about divorce at all. Now we
No.
talked about shooting each
Oh
other.
yeah, because I'm not going through no divorce, but I will take you out.
Yeah, right. But
I said that on film. So
yeah, you said
I got to find another way to get rid of you.
So I'll use that against you if you
Right.
ever shoot me. If I ever come up shot, then I'm going to use that against you. Okay.
I don't know. I won't. I'll hide the gun. No,
But I
I'm
have
kidding.
fun with you.
Yeah, have fun too.
And that's the thing is stay married, have fun,
Absolutely.
love each other, enjoy life, raise your kids, feed them, spank them, do whatever you got to do to make sure everybody gets to where they're supposed to be.
Right.
Amen.
Love you.
Love you too.